Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for dialing in today. I'm Sue Shankar. I'm a brand strategist at Fairygodboss, and I am joined today by a wonderful team from Johnson & Johnson, and we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion at Johnson & Johnson. For those of you who don't know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women, and we will be sharing this recording after our presentation today. And with that, I'd love to introduce Kristen Vaughn. Kristen is the Vice President of Strategy and Deployment for Janssen, which is an area within Johnson & Johnson. That's their pharmaceutical business. She's been at J&J for 16 years now. Kristen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sue, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to participants around the globe. We have over 400 people participating today, and it's very exciting for us. This is our inaugural webinar, We STEM 2D webinar with our partners, Fairygodboss. And you'll see pictured on this slide that We STEM 2D stands for Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, Math, Manufacturing, and Design. And We STEM 2D is a key area of focus for J&J from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And diversity and inclusion, you'll see, is woven throughout our credo. Our credo unifies our J&J team and drives our decision-making, again, in a very unified way across the organization. And for more than 131 years, we've found that true innovation is seldom the result of solitary genius. Rather, it's driven by collaboration, by teamwork, by the combination of different expertise and talents coming together to solve a tough problem. And it's essential to our work process and always has been. And as we live into diversity and inclusion, one key group we focus on are women. And to that end, let's take a look at some statistics specific to the STEM 2D fields on the next slide. What you'll see is that at Johnson & Johnson, we look at STEM through three different lenses. The first is youth, the second is university, and the third is professional. And what you'll see from the statistics pictured here is that in the youth space, approximately 19% of youth are focused, of females rather, are focused on STEM fields. So a big diversity, a big difference between females and males in the youth space. And you'll see that this continues throughout university. And in fact, on this call today, we may have some participants that are making choices about their degree as they pursue their university education. We may have participants that are professionals that are exploring possibly moving into a STEM career or continuing in their STEM career. And so as we then think about how do we encourage more women to move into the STEM fields at Johnson & Johnson, we also reflect, you'll see on the right side, with some of the statistics as it relates to professionals. We know that women constitute 47% of our overall workforce, but only 28% of those women are in the science and engineering workforce. And so one of the reasons we wanted to partner with Fairygodboss is to think of ways, work together to encourage women to continue to explore, lean in on STEM 2D careers, and really drive the diversity and inclusion that's needed to make optimal use of all of our teams. And as we reflect on these statistics, it's really a key reminder to us at J&J of our vision and mission with respect to diversity and inclusion. So what you'll see pictured on this next slide are our vision and mission as it relates to diversity and inclusion. Our vision is simple yet powerful. Be yourself, change the world. Our vision is for every person to use their unique experiences and backgrounds together to spark solutions that create a better and healthier world. And our mission, you'll see listed on the right-hand side of the slide, will set us up to achieve our vision, and that is to make diversity and inclusion how we work every day. And our diversity and inclusion mission is to make diversity and inclusion our way of doing business. And at J&J, we will advance our culture of belonging, where open hearts and minds combine to unleash the potential of the brilliant mix of people in every corner. And it ties in well with my final slide, which shows our global diversity and inclusion strategy. It's made up of 3 key pillars, and they are that we must advance our culture of inclusion and innovation. We at Johnson & Johnson have to build a more diverse workforce for the future, continues to be a very key effort and focus of ours. And we must continue to enhance the link between D&I and our business to drive innovation, growth, as well as our reputation. And we know that focusing our efforts in these critical areas will help us to deliver better outcomes for J&J and all we serve. I'm now going to turn it back to Sue from Fairygodboss to continue our discussion. Over to you, Sue.
Kristen, thank you so much. And how inspiring is that? That's incredible. And I'm so inspired by your vision and mission. So I really appreciate you sharing it. I would love now to introduce our 2 panelists for today. We've got Anne Klaus. She is the Vice President of Global Supply Chain Planning and the Consumer Health Space. And she's been at Johnson & Johnson for about 2 years now. And we've got Kevin Doyle joining us. He is the head of supply chain for Ethicon Biosurgery, and he's been at Johnson & Johnson for 18 years now. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll turn it over to the both of you for introductions. Anne, did you want to go first?
Sure. So thank you, Sue, for the introduction, and actually also for being invited to join the Fairygodboss panel. Today it's an honor. Obviously, I've actually joined J&J just a little over a year ago, so I'm still fairly fresh in my role, and spent most of my career prior in consulting to begin with, and then with Nike in the apparel industry for about 15 years. I work in the field of supply chain, which typically, historically, has been a male-dominated field, and where we do rely on math and science quite a bit. And so I'm really excited to be able to share some of my experience with, an entire generation of women that I hope will aspire to advance their careers in supply chain or in any of the STEM fields.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne. And Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself a bit as well?
Sure. Thank you, Sue. I appreciate, like Anne, the opportunity to spend an hour with you folks today. I think it's super important, not just to, as leaders, share our story and our vision and mission as J&J, but to connect as far as and wide as we can as individuals, so that in some way maybe our story connects and resonates with them and helps them define their path. I think I've been with J&J for 18 years. I was fortunate enough to join recently out of school, and I found a reason never to leave, right? And so I hope I can inspire that same journey with folks on the phone today, and interest in looking at us as you look for, how do you chart your own career path, and hopefully J&J has a role in that.
Yeah, incredible. So that's a great segue into my first question. Kevin, I'd love to understand your career path through J&J and what attracted you there to begin with, and why did you stay?
Sure. So I think, the first piece is what attracted me, right? And I think, what an opportunity for me to be part of what is such an iconic brand in the healthcare industry, right? J&J and the brand recognition is huge. Everyone knows it. Everyone has a product that we manufacture and produce in some way, shape, or form, probably in their homes, or they've used it sometime throughout their lives. And the idea of being part of such an iconic brand is really what attracted me to explore opportunities with J&J. In education, I'm an analytical chemist, so I went to school for chemistry, and early on kind of attached myself to that field. Started with J&J as a chemist on the bench, testing our pharmaceutical products within our Janssen business, at the time, and use that to really learn and grow and develop and understand all that J&J has to offer. I think when it comes to my own specific career path, I spent time on the bench. I decided at some point that it'd be interesting to get into leadership roles and look at opportunities. So I went from the small molecule manufacturing environment to the large molecule manufacturing environment with biologics and part of our Synacor business at the time, which is now part of the Janssen umbrella. And then moving in from quality labs into quality management, so responsible for quality assurance. And I stayed in quality assurance roles, both internal to our plant operations, but also external plant operations for about 17 years. And most recently in May is when I made the jump from the quality function into the supply chain function. So, continuing to innovate my own path and experiences and education along the way to end me where I am right now. I think, we'll get into a little bit, why I think I've stayed as long as I have. And I think it's because of those opportunities that J&J creates, that it's not just one company, but it's actually the composite of multiple different companies, multiple different missions, all to serve our patients better and all to create better health outcomes in healthcare. But the opportunity that creates as an individual growing and learning and developing is immense, right? So, I started in pharma, I'm now in medical device. I worked at the enterprise for a while. And in all those moves, I was able to gain and get exposure to different experiences, which has made me, I think, more robust in my perspectives and allows me to take different views of maybe problems or situations as they arise. I think what keeps me engaged is, the ability to continue to grow in that way and utilize the opportunities within J&J. But what really keeps me also engaged is that I'm becoming, through my career, part of this legacy and history that J&J has to innovate, right? And just quick anecdotal story, right? Last week I was able to go and spend time. We have a museum, a company museum in New Brunswick, where we're headquartered. And I was able to go and spend some time there in the museum, kind of looking at our history as a company. And, I was inspired, to learn that our mission for D&I, we've been an innovative company in products, but we've also been innovative in company in how we attract and retain talent in our organization. And that goes back to 1886, where we had 14 employees. And 8 of those 14 employees were women in the workforce in 1886, right? And then in 1908, we hired our first chemist, Edith von Custer, where we actually went out and actively recruited her from the University of Minnesota. And so, that's when women weren't in the workforce the way they are today, right? And that's when expectations were different. But that shows you kind of the broad history of how we have taken diversity and inclusion and innovating in the way that we attract talent as an organization that has made us, I think, a large contributor to the way we've delivered results over the years. Yeah.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I did not know that, but that's truly remarkable when you think about what the world looked like in 1886, even in 1908. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'd love to ask you the same question and learn a little bit about your career path as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. So by training or trade, I am a commercial engineer, and this is a degree that we have in my native Belgium, a 5-year university degree that is a blend of, engineering as well as call it a business degree or an MBA. And so I always introduce myself as half an engineer because, of course, we don't go as deep into your typical engineering subjects. But it allowed me, I think, to have a good mix of, being able to read a P&L and read a balance sheet in a company, as well as kind of engineering mindset of picking apart a problem, finding root causes, and trying to find solutions for them. And so coming out of university, I did what a lot of us do, right? I started in consulting for a couple of years, and I've been extremely grateful for that experience because it allows you to get a taste for many different industries, many different companies, while you're being taught a very solid framework of how to operate, go into a client, assess a problem, find solutions, work with teams, influence, you get quite a bit of responsibility very quickly. But as a consultant, the downside is that you go in and out, in and out, in and out. and you don't really get to feel the culture of the company that you spend so much time, you spend your day and night for, a couple of months at a time. And so I wanted to experience the heartbeat of a supply chain. I had always in my university degree, so when I was studying as a commercial engineer, I had to pick a master's, which for me was in supply chain management and operations management. And it took me, throughout my university days, through many different factories, through a cookie factory, a steel mill, a high-tech factory. And I don't know, I lit up when I'm in that manufacturing environment where things get converted and get made, right? So there's an innate passion there that I would advise everybody on the call to try and tap into, right? What is it that makes your heart beat a little faster? And so after a couple of years in consulting, I said I want to really be part of a culture of a company where I can not only come in and assess, but also implement and see results, as well as get really close and into supply chain, because I feel that's where my passion lies. And so I had the fortune in Belgium to join Nike, where Nike has its major distribution center for all of Europe, and had the fortune then of developing a wonderful career over 15 years, where in my career, and we can talk a little bit about how that came about, but I was dedicated to supply chain, but deliberately built upon different roles in supply chain, to grow my breadth of experience, as well as gradually gain more leadership experience. So from a functional expertise in supply chain, I worked in roles from the front end of supply chain, working with retailers, all the way to the back end of working with manufacturers, and any stage in between. I've worked in global roles and geography roles with no team, small team, large teams, and roles that were kind of more bad weather captains and good weather captains, right? So, and I think that, anybody who thinks about their career, I think you want to be deliberate about what types of experiences you put in your backpack and how they build upon one another to create a foundation of expertise that you can build upon. Over time, I also moved continents 4 times with Nike. I had 3 children along the way, and so life got really busy. And at some point then we came to the realization of, where do we want to raise our family? Because work and life are one, right? And I want to live my vibrant life. I mean, to our D&I vision statement of be yourself, change the world. I think that just speaks to me so much. So here I had a flourishing career with Nike. I love the brand, love the company, love the innovation, love the connection with sports. But I also have a family that, frankly, I wanted to raise in Europe, at least, for a while. And unfortunately, at that juncture, there were no clear opportunities at Nike, or at least not, opportunities that had longevity. That would, the roles and the opportunities in Europe were limited. And so I made the incredibly, incredibly difficult decision of leaving. And, to Kevin's point, he spent 18 years with J&J. There was never a reason to leave. The same was true for me and my career. But here we were at, a juncture between, in life, and we wanted to raise our children in Europe. And then I started scouting opportunities. And I must say, how J&J presented itself to me as a potential candidate, for a role, the interaction I had with the talent acquisition team at J&J, talking about the credo, talking about the mission statements, talking about the incredible innovations that J&J drives, the impact that we have on people's lives in the healthcare domain. When you talk about HIV or TBC, or currently in the corona virus crisis, how J&J sets up and the level of innovation that we drive is just simply, I was blown away. And so blown away with every interaction as, I got into interview cycle after interview cycle. But ultimately, what made me land at J&J has been the credo. And I think Kristen, talked about it. I'd encourage everyone to Google Johnson & Johnson's credo and read through the paragraph. It starts with doing right for our patients and our parents, then a paragraph about our community impact, our impact on the planet. And somewhere on the bottom of that page says, and if we do all of this right, we'll make a fair, a fair return on our investment. And so that level of attention to all of our stakeholders I think is what made me want to join J&J. And I remember in the interview process having the opportunity of having a conversation with our chief supply chain officer and asking, hey, give me some examples of where the credo really comes to life, where you personally have made a decision to forego on profit for, the benefits or the impact that we would have on patients. And she could just ramble them off one after the other. And that I think was so impressive. So, and so here we are, a year into the job with Johnson & Johnson. So that's a little bit of my story.
I think what's so incredible after hearing both of your stories, Kevin and Anne, is that clearly the diversity and inclusion perspective that J&J brings to the table has been really important to both of you. You don't necessarily hear that from every person you speak to about every job that's out there, every company that's out there. So I'm very interested to hear more about diversity and inclusion at J&J. Specifically, how has it impacted your career as you've been at J&J? And are there any specific examples you have of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can go first, and it doesn't matter. But for me, what it means to me and what it's meant to my career, number one is at J&J specifically, it's given me a chance, right? It's given me a chance to show up, and not just show up, but to be heard and to be understood. That doesn't mean that everything I say is remarkable or influential or executed, right? But it allows me to not just have a seat at the table, having a seat at the table, that's your diversity, right? And making sure you have people that have seats at the table from various walks of life or various different perspectives. But it's actually giving me a voice to speak my mind and say what I think, and to be maybe a little confrontational in my views and opinions, right? To drive conflict, to drive good, meaty, hearty discussions, right? To make sure that at the end of the day, we come out of those conversations making the best decisions aligned with our credo values, right? So I think that that's really important. It also encourages me as a leader within the company, and having a diverse team spread all over the globe, right? My team is in every region of the world. It reminds me to step back and pause and allow others to speak and have a voice, right? And as a leader, to take pause and know that I might think I have a vision of where I want to go, but maybe I don't have the right answers, and to make sure I'm listening to the voices around the table to help guide and make the best decisions. So I think that has been huge. And then I think, there's a value for me that I've experienced in this company with looking at folks that bring different perspectives than you, right? My most recent move into this head of supply chain role for biosurgery, I've never led a manufacturing plant before, right? I've been in quality function for 17 years of my career. And I asked, as part of my next experiences, to say, hey guys, I'd like to maybe do a general manager role of a plant, and they gave me 5 in a supply chain. But I think it's because of that appreciation that maybe I can bring a different perspective to how this business has been run, and put my own spin on it, that has opened that opportunity up to me, right? And that our leaders are willing to take risk where they see opportunity and potential, regardless if there's necessarily the breadth and depth of experience in leading that function, for example. So that's how I think it's helped me in my career.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. And did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, as I reflected, and I think, Kevin, that was a fantastic answer. As I reflect on that question, I think, in all truth and honesty, I've had, especially early on in my career, the benefit of working for amazing leaders, and leaders that were ahead of the curve in terms of advancing a diversity and inclusion agenda, which at the time, in all honesty, I didn't recognize, or I didn't value. For the longest period in my career, have always thought, why do we need the? I'm a woman, I'm advancing my career. If we're great, we'll get there eventually, right? So I really didn't, I think, appreciate the role that these leaders have played in advancing my career. So I just want to be, so with this, if anyone's listening, I want to say thank you. They know who they are. But at the same time, I think in recent years, I have changed 180 degrees in recognizing just how important it is to make sure that we are inclusive and that we show up as powerfully vulnerable leaders, you know, telling our story to the next generation, especially the next generation of women. I have come to realize that while 50% of our workforce at J&J is female and in supply chain is female, that is true in the lower ranks of our organization. But once you get into senior directors and VP and senior VP positions, our female representation drops dramatically. And so I've come to realize that I have an obligation, a duty, a responsibility to reach out over my shoulder and show other women, women, underrepresented groups. I don't want to, you know, I just want to be super inclusive, but tell my story and help others advance their careers. And the story, I think, to any, you know, is as any leader, it's not all, as we have a Dutch expression that it says, it's not roses and moonshine, right? There's been periods in my career that have been extremely challenging when you have 3 small children under the age of 6. You're asked to move across the globe. The kids don't speak English. You have no clue what you're doing. Or when you're on vacation and you're traveling and you're, you know, one of your kids really doesn't want to play with you because, you know, who are you really? Right? So we've all, I want to tell my story more broadly to hopefully inspire women to pursue their ambition, to lean into their ambition and to pursue their career and follow their passions, recognizing that there's trade-offs to be made along the way and that they're difficult. But that if we really want to, we can help one another, support one another, and advance our careers together. And so to same as Kevin, I think inclusion is incredibly important, being aware of our unconscious biases and showing up, I think, without judgment. Took me a while. You know, it took me a while to truly be open and make sure that I'm listening to everybody's point of view without judgment, but with grace and gratitude, and then to incorporate those different views into our path forward. I think an inclusive, and I've learned the hard way that by doing that, we are more innovative, we are more creative, we are more satisfied, we are more resilient, and frankly, we deliver just a better business outcome. And so I am just super inspired by what J&J is offering in the field of diversity and inclusion.
That's great, Anne. And you know, I have to tell you, one of the things that Fairygodboss believes in so strongly is letting women tell their stories. We know that storytelling resonates. And so I'm so excited to hear you talk about telling your own story. And I'm excited to hear these snippets of your story because I do think it's really inspiring. I don't want to get us too off track though, so I'll get back to my list of questions. I'd love to understand how you incorporate J&J's culture in your everyday work. How does it impact your team? How does it impact your work-life balance? And did you want to start? I'd love to hear some of the examples you mentioned earlier.
How does it impact my work? So I don't believe in this notion of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. It's not a trade-off. I have 24 hours in a day, and I get to choose how I live. And yes, work is an important part of that, but I get to, I think balance is a myth, and I think it ebbs and flows, and I think you want to organize your life in such a way that certain elements that you don't enjoy doing, like I don't enjoy to cook and I don't enjoy to, right? That you outsource some of the things that you can, that you spend the time on the things that gives you satisfaction. And to me, work and the realization that I as a really, really tiny part of this company, and together, all of us, all 130,000 something of us, have an enormous impact on the globe, and I get to be a part of that. That's very motivating to me. And so, as I think about how to incorporate, some of these things in my everyday life, I try to be mindful and choiceful about how I spend my time. I try to, and I try to encourage that in my team as well. and it's not always easy, right? Because these jobs are demanding and our careers are demanding, but they can't be, I always say they can't be consuming. I balance family. I have 3 children, but my husband, for example, has chosen to be a stay-at-home dad so that we could find the balance for us as a family between what I do and what he does and how we show up to our children. And what keeps me sane is exercise, right? So what keeps me absolutely sane is to be able to go out there and work out hard 5 days a week, 7 days a week. It's the things that I get enormous vibrance and energy out of. And I must say, J&J has a phenomenal program called Energy for Performance as part of our Human Performance Institute. And I had the benefit and opportunity of going through that program twice while I was still with Nike. I didn't realize it was J&J's at the time. Wow. But I went through it twice while I was at Nike. And what the program does is help you reflect on your physical health, emotional health, mental health, and spiritual health and priorities, and helps you to think through what's your purpose, what's your vision for how you want to live your life, and then how do you make sure that across a lot of dimensions of, as I mentioned, physical, mental, and emotional health, you try to balance and you find a level of discipline that helps you be fit and healthy. And I found within J&J an enormous focus on that, and that really resonates with me. So trying to stay fit and healthy while driving our careers, I think, and really taking care of our health is paramount. So that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I know everybody would answer this question very differently. I think we should all try to live into our passion and live our most vibrant lives.
That's amazing, Anne. Thank you so much. Kevin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Are there ways that you incorporate J&J's culture into your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think it all goes back, right, to what attracted me to J&J in the first place. And it's a clear alignment of our values, right? So the values of the business and then my values as an individual and what's important to me. So, first and foremost, I think, while at work, right, we're serving the patients, we're serving the customers, we're serving our employees. The third section of our credo that Anne referred to earlier is service to our communities and the communities in which we live and work. So I spend a lot of time serving those communities outside of work as a means to, kind of to what Anne mentioned, pulling forward women, right, within supply chain and within the STEM career pathway. Personally, I believe that we need to pull people forward in their lives' journeys and help stand them up to be successful and achieving whatever they want to become or do wherever they are in their lives and meet them where they are to help them bring them along the way. So I spend a lot of time with community service and helping the underprivileged, underserved folks in our community. And I think that that's powerful. But it also comes back into work, right? So then part of all my leadership team meetings, and I have one next week in Switzerland, actually, but we're actually going out into the community and serving that community as a team, right? Because it's, as one person, I can make a little impact, right? But as a bigger organization, team, or group, we can make so much more impact. So I really bring that back into work with me. And I think really igniting that passion and that service mentality to my teams all over the world is what helps kind of drive and impact our teams to think about our customers, think about unmet needs, think about how are we serving them or how can we better serve the folks that give us the privilege to come to work every day, right? So that's my vision or my view on how J&J impacts me daily. But
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. In a former life, I actually did a lot of volunteer work myself. And I will say to this day, my relationship with my mentee, who I consider family, is something that I really value. So that really resonates with me. And I think it's beautiful that J&J gives you the space to engage with the community like that. Okay, I've got one more question for you all, and then I'd like to leave some time at the end for questions from our audience. So if anybody has any questions, please send us a message via Zoom, and I will take a look at those in just a few minutes. So my last question for you is, do you belong to any employee resource groups at J&J? And if so, which ones? If there's many, which one's your favorite?
I'll take this one because I'm fairly new to the company, so I'm still working my way around all the ERGs that we have. But I am a proud member of the Women Leadership Initiative or Women Leadership and Inclusion Initiative in the chapter here in Switzerland, where where the team organizes phenomenal events for us to just network, be inspired, address some themes that are of interest to us, and so I think that's been that has really resonated with me. And then I've recently had the opportunity to join the D&I advisory board for J&J, and have been asked for the next 2 years to take up a mandate to lead our inclusion work stream for supply chain across the 3 sectors. And so incredibly honored to be able to do that. I think, I don't know kind of how many hours in the day I'm going to do all that, but it is super, super important. And so I feel so grateful and honored to be able to lean into that a little bit more than I even have in the past.
Thank you, Anne. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, so, I always say I'm an active member in the Open and Out ERG group, which is a LGBTQ plus ally organization. And it's a wonderful, kind of very impactful organization in ERG with J&J. But I jump at the opportunity to support all of them, right? So, regardless of what I might most relate to as the individual, it's my job and duty and privilege as a leader to see how do I source and scout talent in my organization, driving our D&I vision and mission, right, as a leader. So, when asked to come and participate here, I jump at those chances to do that because that's my duty and my privilege to be able to do that. And regardless of any one way I identify or feel most comfortable, right? There's a great event that we have through the AALC, which is the African American Leadership Council, called Discover Diversity, and it's held on the East Coast. And it's really about, advancing people of color within supply chain roles in the industry. And so being able to take part in that and participate in that has been a nice and important opportunity over the past couple of years. So, really, I jump at all the opportunities for sure.
Wonderful. Before I move over to our Q&A, Kristen, is there anything you'd like to add to anything we've heard today from Kevin and Anne?
I have to say, I'm just amazed at the outstanding feedback that we've received, the stories that both Kevin and Anne have shared, and it's just really inspiring. And I want to take a moment to thank both Anne and Kevin for really just giving back to everyone on the call, and hey, I'm looking forward to diving into the Q&A right now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. Kevin, Anne, any last final thoughts that you'd like to share with the attendees today before we switch gears?
No, maybe, my mantra is always a little bit of, know who you are, know where you want to go, follow your passion, be yourself.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add to that, I spot on, Anne, is network, and don't be afraid to ask for help, right, along the way, because it's a daunting task when you set this vision of where you want to be in your future to achieve that alone, and it's the team around you and the people you surround yourself with that will lift you up and support you on that journey. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you both so much again for your insights today. Let me take a quick look at some of the questions that have come up. So we'd love to hear, one attendee has asked, what are some of the inclusion efforts and initiatives at J&J? I'd love to hear if you have any details around some of the other ERGs other than the ones that we've touched on already.
Maybe one specifically on, an inclusion initiative that I learned about yesterday, which I think is really impressive, is we have over the past 2 years really focused on bringing inclusion in supply chain to all employees everywhere in the world at any level in the company through an unconscious bias e-learning platform. And we have reached 91% of the workforce through that e-learning activity, which I was blown away by, because we are talking wage-based workers all the way to our most senior leaders, all of them taking just an e-learning class on what unconscious bias is, and then taking that into their small team environment to have conversations. And the feedback, not only did we reach 91% of the quote-unquote audience, but also we got some really powerful qualitative statements coming back from workers, on the production line. A woman saying, hey, I'd always get teased about you should be home with your kids, and I never had a platform to address that. But this unconscious bias training has given me the tools and the ideas and the voice to say, you know what, I love being a working mom, and this is my choice to be here, every day. And so just both the quantitative and qualitative impact that things like unconscious bias e-learning exposure gives to the entire community at J&J, it's just been remarkable. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually. And I think that it just goes to show how deeply the mission resonates with J&J employees, that over 90% of employees actually engaged in that learning session. That's amazing. Great. Okay. Kevin, did you have anything to add there, or Kristen?
No, I think it's spot on.
Me too.
Okay, perfect. I would love to hear from you all. With one of the questions, we've gotten a couple of questions actually about open jobs and how people can apply, which is amazing. One in particular, someone would like to know if you have any relaunch programs for women who have, or people who have been away from their professional careers for a period of time and who'd like to re-enter the workforce.
We do, yeah. Kristen, do you want to take it?
Yes, yeah. Indeed, yeah. So we have a program called Reignite that brings women that have taken a period of time off in her career to pursue another interest, take care of children, or take care of a family member or a friend for a period of time, that then want to re-enter the workforce. This program allows the opportunity for this person to come in, work for a 4-month period of time, get some experience under his or her belt, and then hopefully the goal is then for that person to then be put into a permanent role within J&J. And I'm happy to say that 100% of the women that have entered this Reignite program have then gotten full-time jobs at Johnson & Johnson. It really is an outstanding program.
Wow, that's amazing. I did not know that much about the Reignite program, so thank you for sharing that with us, Kristen.
My pleasure.
I've also gotten a question about remote work arrangements, and I'd love to know if Johnson & Johnson has remote work opportunities for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, prior to me taking this role in May of last year, I was remote for 7 years, supporting a global organization, right? So there are roles that allow that flexibility. Obviously, it gets more challenging the closer a role is to plant operations, right? So if we're in a manufacturing area, and it's a manufacturing-based role, then it's probably important to be there where the manufacturing is happening. But there are definitely flexible work arrangements depending on the role and how we can engage with stakeholders and customer groups right within that role. Fully supported, and it's typically, it may not be so explicit in job descriptions, et cetera, but it's a conversation piece that I like to have between myself and my teams to make sure that I'm fully supporting them. It's I think important for those folks that have to balance work and family a little bit closer, right? They maybe have the young kids that are going to sporting events or have school activities, or they want to be home for when they show up from school, and we certainly honor and respect that and do our best to accommodate folks in those situations.
Great. I've got another question here, a little bit of a different switching gears here, but the question is, how do you role model diversity and inclusive behavior in your day-to-day leadership? It's a tough one.
So I think, for me, it's about showing up to things like this, right? It's about being, obviously white male at a women in STEM conversation, right? Because that is my role, is to draw in and identify and understand that talent that's going to help us innovate healthcare, right? And improve the trajectory of health for humanity forever, right? And that's my role as a leader, and it's my duty and privilege to do it. By taking part of this, by talking to my teams about my participation in these types of events, drives then their behaviors to participate and to take part in our D&I vision and mission. And I think it creates even more openness and inclusiveness as my teams hear about how representation of minority groups is important for us, right? And that I push and drive for that, and it's part of my values as a leader, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Given, I think that's great. Could I build on that for a minute, Sue? Because I was kind of processing the question and thinking I should do so much more. So I almost feel like when that question is asked, like, I don't even know if I meet the bar, even though we try to show up every day and be diverse, inclusive, kind of down to earth leaders. But I think there's big and small things that we can do, and sometimes, comfortable and not so comfortable things that we need to lean into. So for example, when you look at your team and you do a team reel using Insights or any other sort of, large scale personality test, and you want to make sure that you have a diverse team, not only in terms of background or gender, but also in way of thinking, right? Am I more detail oriented, or am I more feeling oriented? Am I more extroverted, introverted? And then you have to be really mindful when there's team discussions going on that, you encourage everyone to have their voices heard, because some people will want a long detail, the others will. So every day you're just trying to make people cross that bridge of communication and really listening to one another and recognizing that not all our communication styles are the same. I think it's one way we try to be inclusive. I also thought, we talked earlier about, trying to be non-judgmental and catching yourself when something, a preconceived notion pops in your head. And there was something else I would say on a day-to-day basis. Oh yeah, and thirdly, of course, when we hire, so comfortable. I talked about, there's things that are comfortable, like encouraging communication in your team, but sometimes you really have to lean in and step up and say, if we're putting a slate together to hire a job, and I don't get more than one female candidate on the slate, we go back and do more homework. There have to be women out there that can do this job. And so you have to then at some point, push for the discomfort to say, I won't rest until we've identified multiple candidates. We know they're out there. And then we run the process, run its course. But we know statistics prove that if we have a minimum of 2 female candidates on the slate, that these women have much more likelihood of making it into the role. So I think I've always been against quota, for example. I've never believed in quota. I think I've changed my mind 100% and said I actually do personally believe in quota, because it forces us to work harder to find the talent, right? The bar is the same, but it forces us to look harder for where talent lives. And I think that's why I want to live into that commitment. Do I do it every time? Probably not. Can I be better every day? But we try.
Really, really outstanding comments, Anne. And just to build a bit on your comments, as I was listening, I was thinking about unconscious bias as well. And one of the techniques that I use, whether it's a small group of people that are around the table or a larger group of people around the table, is to really pay attention that every voice is heard, and that everyone, maybe people, not every person may have a comment each time, but to really be inclusive and pause and offer those around the table the opportunity to contribute and add to the dialogue. And the other piece too, as it relates to unconscious bias, is to pay attention to a bias that may turn up. What we've learned in our training program that Anne referenced is that avoiding unconscious biases, it's a mindset. It's not that you can take a class and then boom, you're no longer unconscious bias. It's something that we all have to work on a regular basis. And I'm going to share a brief story just to perhaps show a little bit of my vulnerability, but how sometimes when we make mistakes is when we learn the most. And I was walking my dog in my neighborhood one day, and it's a neighborhood where I had just moved, and I didn't know the neighbors too well. And I saw one of my neighbors walking with her dog. Her dog's name is Bruce. And interestingly, I knew the dog's name, but I didn't know the owner's name. And so I said, "Hey, Bruce, how are you, buddy?" Gave him a scratch on the head. And I noticed that the owner, Tracy, who's now a very good friend of mine, was wearing scrubs. And so the bluish type clothing from working in a hospital or so forth. And I said, "Oh, I'm Kristen." She said, "I'm Tracy." And I said, "Oh, I see you're a nurse." Terrible, right? I see you're a nurse. Not, "Oh, which hospital do you work for? Are you a physician? Are you a nurse?" I immediately had the unconscious bias that she's a female, so she must be a nurse. And I'm a female. And so I thought, all of a sudden I caught, and she said, "Oh, I practice emergency medicine. I'm a physician." And it was this moment of, oh my goodness, I can't believe I made that mistake. But it was a powerful moment for me. And that's why I share it as a moment of weakness here, just because paying attention to unconscious bias, it's an important component of making sure that inclusivity is happening. And so if we're back now around the table in business meetings, thinking about how we can include others around the table, and if we see an unconscious bias happen, correct it. Don't just allow it to happen to one of your colleagues. Politely make a comment and bring that person back into the fold.
Kristen, that is a powerful story. Thank you for sharing it. And I think part of the power in that story is that as we listen to you talk about it, for me, it sparked moments that I can think of in my own life where I've perhaps made the same exact error or something very similar, and to your point, unconscious bias is something that we do work on over time. It's not something that you can try once and be good at. So I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that story. I think it for me is very eye-opening. We are quickly running out of time, so I'd like to give you each 1 minute to share any final thoughts, feelings, impressions you'd like to share with the audience about why you love working at Johnson & Johnson, and why folks should consider exploring more opportunities. Anne, you're first up on my screen. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I feel like I've been here the shortest amount of time at J&J, I mean. But yeah, as I said earlier, right, the credo is what binds us. I think it's incredibly powerful to recognize that our first obligations to our patients and our parents and our consumers. And I just, to me, I've been blown away by the level of innovation and the investment in innovation and the commitment that J&J has made towards healthcare innovation at large, despite, some of the controversy that we sometimes see. From the inside out, I can only attest to the truly genuine care from our CEO all the way down to the ranks of the company to do what's right. And I think that is beyond inspiration. And so sometimes I feel that we generally in society might diss some of the, the large corporations, but I fundamentally believe that, we can use our size for good, and that J&J does so. So I think it's really important the scale that we have and the ability to impact globally is second to none, and that's an incredible reason to be here and to stay here.
Thank you, Anne. Kristen, you're next up on my screen. Do you want to go next?
Very good. I would love to. So I've been with J&J for 16 years, and I absolutely love working at Johnson & Johnson. If you Google Johnson & Johnson, you'll see that our key focus, our mission, our vision is about changing the trajectory of healthcare for humanity. And how incredible that Anne, Kevin, and I, and our other J&J colleagues who may be on the line get to come to work every day and contribute in some way to changing the trajectory of healthcare for humanity. And doing it, as Anne mentioned, singularly focused, united around our credo. If you haven't, as Anne mentioned, if you haven't had a chance to read our credo, please take a look at it, because you will understand when you read it, and perhaps reflecting on the conversation that Kevin and Anne have shared with us today, that it's incredibly powerful. It unites us all. We have different ways of thinking and analyzing problems, but having our credo in place really unifies us as a team, and it just is, I'm incredibly proud to work for J&J. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristen. Kevin, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, so, quickly, I think what I know is that healthcare will continue to evolve, right? And it's not necessarily the folks we have sitting around the table within J&J now that are going to have the next best innovative idea and solution to serve our customers and improve outcomes and really change that trajectory of healthcare for humanity, right? So it's out in the world, and I encourage you folks to come and help us achieve our mission and our goal of serving the customer in that passionate way that we do. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and share bits of my story, and I encourage you guys, to go and look at ourstory.jnj.com, which is a external facing website, right, that will show you the history of what I think is one of the greatest companies in the world, and let our story speak for itself, and our history of performance and customer focus, I think, really will speak for itself. So thank you for the opportunity.
Kevin, Kristen, and thank you again so much for participating in our webinar today. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing the recording with everyone. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. We are so happy to have had you on our call today. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.